This is the week ahead. My name is Ibrahim Sani from the AWANI newsroom.
And I'm Hafiz Marzuki from the AWANI studio.
So there's plenty of items that needs to be unpacked for the week ahead, leading towards the 4th of April, this year. We start off with the big summit that is happening in Jakarta on April 24th. Why we have to look back one day when we talk about the week ahead is because there are plenty of things that will be unpacked following the summit. This will be the first in-person summit that took place for many of the leaders, particularly following the post-pandemic situation. We've also understood that a few of the ASEAN leaders did not come, including that of Duterte and the Thai PM. Hafiz, what do you think of the outcome of the meeting?
Yes, Ibrahim, of course, when we look at the whole summit, this is the first such summit being called in Jakarta, and of course, a lot is riding on it because of the whole situation that is currently developing, especially with the Myanmar situation. And what I think is most interesting here is how the principle of non-interference is being used here. Because as you see, ASEAN is all about the principle of non-interference. But this is the first time that they've actually grouped together, meet together to find a solution for the problem at hand. And we are talking, of course, about the Myanmar's junta to discuss the crisis at hand.
So on Agenda AWANI, I interviewed Thomas Daniel of ISIS Malaysia, and he was very bleak in his outcome when it comes to the summit. He was also talking about the kind of agency, unilateral agency of all the individual countries when it comes to addressing members of ASEAN. So not many of each and individual countries can do. But collectively, if ASEAN does not solve this in unison, is going to be a problem that is going to be continued. And this is one of the reasons why it's going to be a gridlock into what can be done. And most likely than not, nothing can be done. And that's why in the week ahead, we also take a look into what it means for ASEAN when it comes to not solving the Myanmar crisis. There's a lot of expectations that in the final week of April, we're going to see one or two statements coming in from the ASEAN membership and body itself and the Secretariat. There's also going to be individual statements coming in from the President of Indonesia, as well as the Prime Minister of Singapore, and perhaps even the Prime Minister of Malaysia also issuing some statements. So those kind of statements we have to keep an eye out on. Next is, of course, the big topic, and my, of course, favorite topic, football. We've had a very tumultuous week, Hafiz, as a Manchester United fan, and yourself, you must be disgusted at what just took place. I was literally, throwing a tantrum at home when Chelsea announced this very selfish and greedy movement to break away from the Champions League and to break away from UEFA and FIFA. But of course, it seems like most of it has been resolved because, let's do a quick recap, a lot of the football clubs around Europe that is not part of the UEL or the European Super League have condemned such a move. And football's most powerful clubs are, of course, facing mounting challenge by their respective members to not move ahead with this notion. And indeed, they have retracted. At least the 6 English clubs have also retracted. I don't know whether Real Madrid and all that is going to slowly announce that they will also pull out from the Super League. But what is to be expected in the week ahead is the heavy sanctions and perhaps fines that will be imposed on them by UEFA. And of course, one has to note that there are some reports, including that coming from the Athletic, in that Real Madrid and Juventus might be facing a harsher or stiffer penalty compared to the English clubs. What is your take into all this, Hafiz?
My God, Ibrahim, I mean, you're right, exactly. You said Chelsea was among the first club to announce, and also they also the first to pull out from the Super League. And I think it is emblematic of the problem at hand, right? You can see how the Real Madrid president, Florentino Perez, which is, I would say, one of the key guys in this European Super League or ESL, was quite adamant in actually saying that this is for the good of football. And you can see from how he carries himself and how the projects takes shape. It seems that these 12 clubs are very confident about their ability to not just garner the people, or rather to garner the eyeballs, but they're also quite confident in garnering the attention and also the sponsorships and the money together with it. However, it is pleasant to hear that almost all clubs, at least in the English Premier League, who were involved in the Super League, actually retracted or withdraw their application to enter the European Super League, because I believe these. I am of the view that it is better to amend the current format of the UEFA Champions League or Europa League.
Well, that's the idea, right? They wanted to amend it and then they didn't like it. We're talking about the new reformatted Champions League, where they're going to have a lot more teams involved. They're going to play a lot more games, I think, in 2023 onwards. But it's those changes is not as material as the money involved, because one of the bigger reasons why the so-called Big 12 clubs of Europe wanted to create or break away into a new league is because of the money involved. JP Morgan was reported to be going to be financing the first few rounds of it. Each club could get up to 200 to 300 million pounds in the first season alone, leading up to billions of euros coming in terms of revenue. And this touches a larger picture, because money from broadcasting rights are slowly depleting. We've seen how money from sponsorships from typical names like Adidas and Nike have also been reducing over the past few years. This is a global trend. Perhaps the money that is supposed to be made out of football have reached some sort of saturation, to a point where the most that they can get is currently right now, and they are thinking ahead. And without the regard of fans and the greater impact of football per se, because of the fact that they want to make more money, that is one of the bigger reasons why they want to push ahead with the Super League. So staying in Champions League, format, old format, new format, doesn't matter. It doesn't solve that question of money. And I don't know whether them sticking to not going ahead with the Super League, as per announced last week, is going to be a permanent thing. My hunch is this thing is going to crop up, if not this season, next year, perhaps 2 years from now. It's not going to be the end of it.
Perez has actually said that this project is actually on standby, you know. So that means that it's clear from his intention that he wants this thing to go on, and he wants it to be ready for the next reiteration if it were to come up. However, Ibrahim, I know you've said about the business side, the money side, the sponsorship side, but I want to ask you as a football fan. I mean, you're a Chelsea fan, me a Manchester United fan. Do you really want to see a Chelsea versus Real Madrid match every season?
No, of course not.
I mean, it's more special when it's the
more
semi-finals,
special,
right?
if Chelsea gets beaten by, say, Napoli, gets beaten by Marseille. Chelsea gets a little bit more competitive, but at the same time gets beaten by West Brom in the Premier League, or as we just did, very recently with lower league teams. That's the point. If you can think about what Kevin De Bruyne, the Manchester City midfielder, put on his Instagram last week, and if we can put it up right now, in fact, he was talking about, I am a little boy who came out from the villages of Belgium. I have competed in every single levels of football, and he is proud that he is competing at both club and country. But he says that the most important thing, or the operative word here, is competing. He wants to compete. And if you do create some sort of a breakaway league like the Super League, that removes that competition away. Yeah, you're going to solve the money problem, but you're going to be destroying football per se at large, and not just football in Europe, but football in totality, because let's face it, Europe is football and football is Europe. We can have countries or talents coming in from elsewhere around the world, but it's still dominated by the Europeans.
Yes.
So if the Big Six in England and the Big 12 in Europe break away, that removes that notion of competing, the very notion that Kevin De Bruyne and people like him are arguing about. And that's the big problem here.
Exactly.
Let's move on to the big news of the second week of phase 2 of COVID. We've now entered phase 2 of COVID and vaccination, pardon me. And it comes at a very peculiar time because cases have hit very, very high. The graph, we've both, Hafiz, you and I, refuse to put it up on screen because it's all too familiar now that it's just going up. If you missed somehow or other the trend of COVID cases, it looks like the letter J. And right now, even with the vaccination process taking place well and hard, there's a lot of issues on whether or not we can actually vaccinate people quickly enough. Very recently, a news organization put a calendar on the speed of vaccination around the world, and if you put in that rate that we're in right now, it's a very sad rate of 4.9 years. Malaysia will take 4.9 years to vaccinate 80% of our population if the speed of vaccination doesn't increase at the rate it is now. And that is a very dire look to speak of.
And that is the problem that I think highlighted by the coordinating minister for the National Vaccination Program, Khairi Jamaluddin, who said that yes, right now the rate is quite low, but he's assured the Malaysian public that by the time it's June, when more vaccines arrive, it's going to be ramped up even up to quadruple. But I think the problem here, Ibrahim, is actually the rate of registration, right? Because if you look up till today, we're talking about just around the 40% mark in terms of registration of population in Malaysia, and it's only halfway from getting this, the promised land, which is the herd immunity, which is 80% of the population. And we're also talking about not just registered population, but those who are, we are also including undocumented migrants and other, I would say, other people as well. So it is important for us to achieve a high number as soon as possible in terms of registration, so that we know that at least by the time when the vaccines do arrive, we can get that magic number of 80% of the population.
All right, we'll go for a short break before we continue on with the week ahead. Thanks for staying on with us. Let's move on with the week ahead on the final week of April of 2021. We move on to some business news, including that of the announcement of the most famous corporate captain of Malaysia, Datuk Seri NAZIR RAZAK. Very recently, he has been made chairman of Bank Pembangunan. Now, this is something of an expected hire, because we've seen how Bank Pembangunan Malaysia Berhad or BPMB have made overtures to appoint someone that is well connected to the Malaysian corporate scene, and the appointment of Datuk Seri NAZIR RAZAK as its non-executive chairman earlier last week shows that is a firm commitment from Bank Pembangunan, the development bank, trying to push ahead with modernizing itself. In a statement, the bank said that Datuk Seri NAZIR succeeds Datuk Zaitun Muhammad Hassan, who retired in February this year after having served 2 years. And of course, Datuk Seri NAZIR is the founding partner and chairman of Ikhlas Capital, the PE firm that is formerly based in Singapore, but from what I heard, a lot of them are now moving back to Kuala Lumpur. Ikhlas Capital is an ASEAN private equity fund manager that is dedicated to partnering and growing companies across the region. Very recently, they've just funded a farm, if I'm not mistaken, in Philippines. So those are the kind of things that will move ahead for Ikhlas Capital. How Datuk Seri will try to help the board achieve its very important role of ensuring good corporate governance in Bank Pembangunan will be tested. But having said that, Datuk Seri NAZIR is a firm believer of strong corporate governance, having been at CIMB Group for the longest of time. And of course, Datuk Seri NAZIR is coming back, I suppose, from semi-retirement, because when he left CIMB Group a few years ago, he says that he wants to hang his boots up. I'm not too sure whether he misses going back to work, because why else would he agree to being chairman of Bank Pembangunan?
But Ibrahim, coming from me, who's just a casual observer of how bankers move about in this scene or in this landscape, how do you think Datuk Seri NAZIR will will impact Bank Pembangunan, because it seems to me that Bank Pembangunan is more catered towards the business side. There is not much more consumers based.
No, you're dead on, because Bank Pembangunan was incorporated in 1973. It was mandated to assist entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, including that of micro entrepreneurs. But the fact that BPMB or Bank Pembangunan wants to provide long-term to medium-term financing to businesses, it seems like Datuk Seri Nazir is being called upon to tap into two of his strengths. Number one, strong corporate governance, and number two, the ability to give cheap financing to those that need it most, and particularly trying to source for cheap capital. Both are needed right now, and we understand that that is critical for us to reboot the SME sector following a pandemic. And if anything, 2022 will be the story of the SME. A lot of SMEs are hiring Malaysians. Some estimates go up to 85% or 95% of Malaysian workers are actually being employed by SMEs. So it's actually crucial for this sector to remain buoyant and vibrant in the years to come, if not the months to come. So I think Datuk Seri Nazir, being appointed as Chairman of Bank Pembangunan, is expected to look into these kind of areas very aggressively and intently. But of course, in pursuit of trying to maintain good corporate governance, he wouldn't be going into the, weeds of the businesses. That is still at the executive team. That is still part of the chief executive's role to carry out that mandate. But as the Board of Governors, he is going to bring about a change of focus and view, and perhaps institute some organizational or structural reform that might be needed at Bank Pembangunan. Those are the kind of items that I think he's going to bring to the table. Following this, in pursuit of trying to keep up with all the other business news, very soon, in fact as soon as next week, Masing Group might be building rubber glove factories. Masing Group has completed the testing and commissioning of 2 of its glove production lines, and as they say colloquially in the streets of KL, everybody, including your uncle, is going to start a rubber glove factory.
It's the most profitable business, right now?
Yeah. Very recently, our colleague was interviewing Top Glove, and of course, Top Glove have registered very strong earnings this year. Kosan Rubber have published their quarterly earnings. In fact, the recent quarter, they've published more than R1 billion in terms of revenue. Just one quarter, imagine in 3 months they can actually garner R1 billion in terms of revenue. So a lot of money can be made and is being made in the rubber glove scene, and of course Masing is going to go ahead with this as well. The factory is located in Kapar, Klang, and is expected to start production as early as next month. So be aware of such news. I don't know whether this is going to change or affect their stock prices. What do you think of this?
I think, of course, it's good news, right? Of course, it's going to be a bump to the share prices. And what I think is most interesting here is, of course, when you talk about Masing, you always think about big buildings, properties, nice landscapes, etc., etc. And when I read the news, I did the strongest, or rather the most obvious of double take. Am I reading it correctly? Masing is actually going into gloves making, but I guess this is part of diversification, right? Right now, when we're talking about the pandemic era, every company,
it's not so much as diversification as pivoting away, because Masing being a property developer, and as you know, Hafiz, property developers are facing a tough time, not just during pandemic, but normal times as well. So I think this is a move away. In fact,
or maybe a pivot.
It is a pivot. I am having a small bet, and this is not news, of course. Whatever I'm saying is not fact. I just want to clarify that this is what I think. I think Masing is slowly pivoting away from the property business towards something much more profitable, which is rubber glove making. That's what I think, and that's why they are betting on this particular rubber glove production factory in Klang. I don't know, what do you think of this?
I guess I would say all the best to them, because it's not easy to manage a rubber glove making company, because or factory, because because of the closeness between people, between the personnel in there. We are talking about serious SOPs that needs to be adhered to, very much different from the construction or the property sector. I wish all the best to Masing, and we hope hope to hear more better news from them,
which is going to come next week. All right, let's move ahead to Top Glove, yet another rubber glove maker. Can you imagine that? We are speaking of Masing as a rubber glove maker now. Top Glove has very recently downsized its Hong Kong IPO, or initial public offering, to raise 4 billion ringgit, or 4.17 billion ringgit to be precise, instead of the 7.7 billion ringgit initially. In a Boris feeling, Top Glove explained that the decision to reduce this is because of the glove maker's attempt to take into account the best business interest that it has for the shareholders, whatever that means. But I do think that the appetite for them to raise that kind of money, because there's a shortfall of 3 billion ringgit here, it's because the market is rather soft in their interest towards getting more buy-in from Top Glove. That's what I think. And I also think that in the week to come, Top Glove is going to announce more information about how they're going to improve their corporate governance internally. As mentioned earlier, our colleague Rizal Zulkapli has interviewed Top Glove's executive on Niaga Awani, and feel free to look that up, about the changes in ESG governance within Top Glove. As we all know, 2021 has been a flavor of the ESG compendium, and perhaps a good look into the kind of businesses that focuses more on the E and S of the ESG, i.e. the environment and social impact of the ESG framework, will benefit from it. Failure of which, as per my interview with Anand of Maybank IB Research, he says that the ESG notion is no longer able to be ignored. Companies who ignore ESG or good ESG practices will come at their expense, and as seen in Top Glove, the social aspect of the ESG business has come under fire, and because of that, some of their products are currently being banned from being imported into the US and some markets in Europe as well, until and unless they improve their efficiency and production status. And of course, all this is ongoing, things are changing, and of course Top Glove has doubled down on the notion of improving the ESG notion, and perhaps now is a good time for Top Glove to really think twice about the kind of business expansions that they want to do. There's no point expanding their business if they are still stagnant into improving their ESG issues.
I guess they actually have to think twice, Ibrahim, because if property developers like Masing actually also think into coming into the glove making business, what more, how many other companies will enter into competition with them? I guess I also have to wish all the best to them as well.
The final news that we want to carry out that might take place next week is Airbus and Malaysia. Very recently, Airbus has said that the Industrial Collaboration Program, or ICP, plays a key role in strengthening Malaysia's production and perhaps productivity in the aerospace scene. And because of this, the aircraft and aerospace product manufacturer Airbus SE says that they are talking to Malaysia about improving their ICP capabilities and trying to ensure that some technological transfer happens between the company and the nation. But of course, this comes at a time when Airbus themselves are facing a lot of issues. Not to say that they are the only ones doing poorly. They are, I guess, direct competitor Boeing is also facing a tough time, not least because of their 737s failing to fly properly and resulting in deathly crashes all around the world a few years ago, and still currently reeling from that aftermath. It's the fact that the outlook of the Airbus and the outlook of the aerospace industry remains to be soft in the years to come following the pandemic. Even if one gets vaccinated, a lot of people, a lot of companies have come about to rethink about how they do business, and apparently you don't have to travel that much to get it productive. So because of that, the outlook for not just the aircraft manufacturing scene, but the aerospace business itself will continue to be soft. So perhaps jobs like ICP or efforts like the ICP projects between Airbus and Malaysia is timely to be done.
And I guess these are the kind of projects that I think there should be more of, because there's a need to stimulate the industry. And you said it correctly, aerospace is one of the industries who's badly impacted by the pandemic, and I'm sure other industries would also benefit with some sort of this kind of plan as well.
Until then, that's it for this particular week of The Week Ahead. If you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to Astro Awani and look for The Week Ahead. There's plenty of information that we can give you and you can use to ensure that your week ahead remains to be productive. My name is Ibrahim Sani.
And I'm Hafiz Mazuki, signing off for this episode.